Money in Excel. Create an income statement using tables in Excel. Get ready because it's time to excel in money using money in Excel. Here we are in our Money in Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we set up the Money in Excel template worksheet, and then we connected the financial data to it. Now we're going to be formatting some of that information. You can open up the Money in Excel worksheet if you have a subscription type model for Microsoft Office by going to the File tab over here in a new Excel worksheet, and then going down to the new option. You're looking at Money in Excel template, which may be up top, or it may be then down here, down below. Going back then to our worksheet, then you would need to connect to the financial institution. We now have our data here in the Transactions tab. We sorted that data by adding the categories and subcategories so that we can try to get it as easily formatted as possible to piece this thing together. We're imagining now we're putting together like a year's worth of data, even though we're looking at less than a year now, but you could do a whole year because I could do all of 2020 if we wanted to. Take that information and then sort it into an income statement, in a case, our imagination being that we're possibly formatting this data so that we can use it to prepare, say, a tax return, possibly having both business and personal type of stuff wound together in a checking account. How can we carve out, say, the business information so I can basically do the taxes with it? So let's go back on over here. We then copied this data because I'd like to work with it in another tab. So now I've got it formatted here. I don't want to lose the data here. I don't want to mess up this transactions worksheet since it's part of the template. So we created then another tab over here. We copied and pasted that data into this tab, and now we can go over here and sort this data out. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this window to the right. We don't need that anymore. And now there's a couple different ways we could do this. We could do this kind of a nicer way or a fancier way with pivot tables and whatnot, or we could do it in a really pretty basic way where we could just kind of group what we need to group together. We have it sorted the way we need to sort it now, so we could just basically just carve this thing out into an income statement. I'm going to copy this tab again so we can do this multiple different times. So I'm going to put my cursor on the tab at the bottom. I hold down Control, and then I left click on this tab and drag. I'm going to copy it that way. I think you can also right click and copy the tab over, move or copy that way. I just like to use the drag and drop method holding down Control. And then if I go back to the first tab, now let's think about how we can do this a couple different ways. Now, because we sorted this and we put all the personal information up top, you can see it by category here or category type. Anything that says personal, we categorized all these transactions as personal and not business. And if our main focus is just to get to a Schedule C type of information, then we might just delete everything that's personal, and because of the way we sorted it, we put it all on top. If it's not all on top, and you sorted it some other way, you could just go through your data and pick out everything that's personal. But because we put the numbers up top in the categories, that's why we did it, so we can kind of just take all that stuff off the top and just delete it. Now, you might be saying, hey, I'd like to do something with that because this is personal data. Maybe I want a personal income statement to help me out with my budgeting and things like that. We could do something with this data as well, either with a table or something like that, or we can basically use a pivot table because we did put some categorizations. We called it all personal, but we did do some subcategories, which we may be able to create basically an income statement from using the subcategories. So you can get into that, but for now, we're gonna just carve it out. I'm just gonna feel okay about deleting it because we have the backup data over here. Now, also note that as I start to delete the data, this is different, a lot different than what you would do in something like a QuickBooks. If you were to do the same process in a QuickBooks or any accounting software that you were trying to input the bank feed data, then make financial statements from the bank feed data, you can't delete the bank data, or you shouldn't delete the bank data with regards to QuickBooks. You'd have to take all the bank data, add it into the system, and then the system would then calculate whether it should go on the balance sheet or the income statement based on the account types you have. So there's a double entry accounting system. You have to basically be in alignment. When you use accounting software, it forces you to use that double entry accounting system. So that could be good if you understand the double entry accounting system, but it can also be a little bit more difficult because you can't just delete things in order to get to the income statement generally. You got to basically enter it in such a way that it properly records balance sheet items and income statement items. If you're talking over here in Excel, and all we need is an income statement, I'm not looking for a double entry accounting system to create the balance sheet or anything like that. I can then just delete the data that I don't need. So all the personal data in, say, a QuickBooks system, if it was using the same checking account, I still couldn't delete it. I'd have to record it as a draw, or I'd have to record it as another class. Whereas here, if I'm just trying to carve out an income statement, then I can just delete it, right? So in some ways, that's a little bit easier, although the double entry accounting system is good, because that gives you a whole lot more confidence that you're doing things correctly. But again, a lot of people have gig work these days and whatnot, and they might just have it in their personal checking account. They don't have a separate checking account, and they don't have a lot of information. So there's one way you might be able to carve it out, and it might be actually a little bit easier maybe than a QuickBooks. So in any case, we're then just going to put our cursor on column 2 here, or row 2, and that's going to select the entire row. I'm going to go on down to row 18. Those are all the balance sheet items that we have, and then the income statement items are below that. I'm going to just right-click there and delete the entire thing. I'm just going to go, yep, clip that out, and there we have it. And then we have the income items that are lined up here. Now, the easiest way we could do this is like this column right here. Income and expenses, don't really need that column. It's pretty self-explanatory. The income's positive, the expenses are negative. So I could delete this column altogether, right-click, delete, and then I'm just going to sum up basically these rows that we have. We might want to basically, I could say, well, let's just sum these up. I'm going to go down here and we could sum them up. I'm just going to say this equals the sum. This is the most common formula within QuickBooks. This equals the sum of all this positive information, all the positive numbers up top. Just going to sum them all up. I did that kind of with a keyboard stroke. You could say equals and then type in SUM, double click on the sum function, and then, highlight all of these. And there we have it. So there's going to be the sum of the income. Note, you might be saying, hey, I'd like to see these breakouts between the incomes for Amazon, incomes for Audible and whatnot. And so you could do that. We could do that, of course. That would be a more detailed type of income statement. I'm thinking now for taxes, we may not need that detail, right? We might just need just total income here. And then we need to break out by category of expenses. So here's the utilities. So I could say equals the sum. I'm going to sum up simply the utilities. The expenses will be negative. Here's rent. So I could say this equals the sum of all the rent from here on up. I can then say, okay, here's the software that goes down to here. It equals the sum of all the software items from there to there. And then we've got the supplies are going to go down to here. So I'm going to say, all right, equals the sum of the supplies. And then we've got the telephone equals the sum of the telephone. So there we have it. And if I total this thing up, I can double check it. I can take the sum of the entire thing. And because the positive numbers are income and the negative are expenses, I can just sum up the entire row. Everything's just using the sum function. Comes out to 39,202. If I do the same thing here to double check it, sum up everything here. So there we have it. It has been checked double time, doubling the checking. For some reason the formatting isn't over here. I'm going to go to the home tab, format, bring that over here. There we go. We could even clean it up a little bit further. I could say I'm going to just pull this stuff all together. This is going to be the income account is going to be equal to that. And then the utilities and bills are going to be equal to that. And then the rent is going to be here, is going to be equal. So I'm just trying to put it in one nice little space. And then we've got the software is going to be equal to that. And then we've got, what else do we've got? We've got the supplies, which is equal to that. And then we got one more thing. We've got the telephone, which is equal to that. And so we can say I'm going to make this cell a little bit bigger. And there's our nice little income statement that we can carve out for like a little business that might be gig work or something like that. This is, and again, I made up some of these categories and whatnot. And then, so this is just data at this point. So that's one way you can kind of carve this out. So that's one option to do that. And it's pretty straightforward. I think most people can visualize that fairly easily with just using the sum function to basically carve that out. Another way you might think about it, if I go to the tab to the right and just using tables, we're not going to go to the pivot tables yet. We might do that next time. I'm going to copy this tab over again. I'm going to hold down Control and left click on this tab and then left click and drag to the right. So now we have two tabs again, and I'm going to go to the tab to the left. A lot of times when I sort this type of data, I like to use basically tables for it. So a lot of times if I need to do more sorting, then I might insert a table. So I might go insert. I'm not going to do a pivot table, but I'm going to make it into a table by just clicking the whole thing, and notice it's selecting the whole range of data. And then I'm going to say, okay. So now I've got a table. It's not a pivot table, but it's a table that I can now sort a little bit easier, and it's a little bit more, it's much more unlikely then that I'm going to mess up the data by basically shuffling the columns, meaning shuffle this column so that it doesn't line up to the proper, merchant or category column, which I don't want to do, right? I want to make sure the numbers are lining up to the proper category. So now we can do more sorting over here. So once again, we can kind of sort in a similar way as we had originally the data. We could sort by the date. We could sort by the merchant. Might be most likely, again, that we sort by the category here. So sorting by the category is what we currently have it sorted by. We could sort by subcategory if that would be relevant to us. And then we could sort by the amount and the category type. Once again, the category type might be useful because that will show us the personal versus the business income. Now, another thing that's kind of nice once you have it in this table format, you could do the same thing now, is you could basically sum up the categories that are similar, the like items. So I can go to the column, to the right, and I can do the same sum function, summing everything up. You also have a nice tool. If I go back on this table, notice you have the table design tab on the right-hand side. One thing you can do to break this information out once it's in a table like this is you can make a slicer. So if I go into the table design tools function and make a slicer, then it's going to give me basically the categories that we can break this out by. So the most common, here's our headers over here. Here's the headers that are labeled here. The most common would be the category slicer, a slicer by category. And then that would give us this option here, which would basically group our information together once again. So you can use this to kind of group the information. The personal data would then be up top. So if you wanted to then manipulate the personal data in this way, you can go to that portion. The transfers, the balance sheet data, and then your income accounts are going to be here. So once again, if you go into your income accounts, this might make it a little bit easier to kind of parse this stuff out. You might take your income line item. I put it somewhere under the table down here because notice it's going to hide rows when you use the slicer. So you might then say income. And then instead of using a formula, I'm just going to highlight this whole thing and say that comes to 45,995.25 according to that. So 45,995.25 on there. And then we can then go to the utilities here. And then so we got the utilities. And I'm going to say this adds up to, if I select those two, 95.95. So I'm going to say negative 95.95. And then rent here, we go to the rent. I'm going to say rent. And then this is going to be adding these up. Is going to be 561267. Negative 5612.67. Then we can go to the software category. Just say software. And select those items. That's going to be 211. So I'll say negative 211. And then the supplies, and then I'll type in supplies and add those up. That's going to be 747.15, so 747.15. And then we've got the telephone, and that's going to be adding up to the 126.37, negative 126.37, was it? 126.37. I'll make this one a negative. And this was the telephone. So So again, it's a little bit clunky to sort that out with these tables, but you can kind of do that. You can do the same thing for the personal, and you can basically imagine how you could take this data and basically create an income statement. If I was to sum this up, I'm going to get the net income of that 39,202. If I sum this up all the way up to here, I get, once again, the 39,202.11. So that's the 39,202.11. So it looks like it ties out. We could, of course, make further subcategories and whatnot with that type of method too. But just note, no matter what you do with it, you could sum it up in the same way we did before, right? You can go to the total income line and sum up over here. If you do so, I would skip a line between the table, because common practice is if you have a table here, you don't want something to be right up next to it, right adjacent to it, or right next to it, because then it's going to try to include it in the table possibly. So you want to keep a space unless you want it to be part of the table. And so I'll keep that data over here, and you could sum those up in the same way we did last time. I like this method a little bit better. I don't like to really delete all the data unless we need to, you know, because we could still do something with the personal type of stuff. I like the tables because then I have these options that are the filter options, and I could sort the data. And when I do sort the data, I'm unlikely to mess up the data, you know, transferring the columns so that the numbers no longer line up to the proper category. Okay, so those are two methods. Next time we might get into the more in-depth method, which would be pivot tables. So pivot tables can sort this data nicely, and you can do more stuff with it, possibly making tables that would break down the information in more categories, like the different income categories, which might be more useful for personal use type formats. You might not need that for taxes, but you might want to use this data to get to more detailed kind of income statements and break out possibly the personal data and the other data. So I'm not a pivot table expert, so I'll let you know that, right? Well, I haven't used them as much for a while, but some basic tables are pretty useful to see. And if you visualize the tables and work with them for a while, you start to get pretty good at them. So in any case, we'll take a look at that and try to format this with pivot tables next time.